and now it's lightning. Cool. Why does it always need to rain when I need to film? Hey guys, so today I will be filming my May wrap-up. I did read 10 things in May, one of which was a graphic novel and another was a novella, so both of those were considerably short, but overall I feel like I did have a really successful reading month. And it is raining again. I don't know how. Every time I go to sit down and film, it decides it wants to rain. So it is thunderstorming and lightning, but hopefully we can all ignore it and find it kind of relaxing. I personally love to read while listening to the rain, so that's probably what I'm going to do after this. But yes, let's get straight into the books because I have a lot to talk about. The first book that I finished in May I don't have with me because a friend of mine lent it to me, but that is You by Charles Benoit. I am still surprised by how much I adored this novel. I ended up giving it 4 out of 5 stars. I went into it not knowing what it was about, but came out realizing what a dark, atmospheric novel it is. It's told in second person, so you really want to sympathize with the main character, but you find it really hard to because he doesn't seem to care anyway about what's going on. So You is a young adult contemporary realistic fiction novel about a young man, I believe he's 15 or 16, named Kyle. So it kind of shows him going through high school and he keeps getting beaten down both at home and at school, but then he meets this new guy and his friend and they get into a lot of trouble together, but it all seems to be harmless until one day it goes too far. If you've been watching my channel for a while, you're probably going to be very tired of listening to me talk about this book, but I reread The Naturals by Jennifer Lynn Barnes, and again, I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. This was my 3rd time reading the novel. I don't think I picked up anything else that I did the first 2 times, but I remembered quite vividly what was going to happen and step by step, but I was still so engaged in the story even though I knew exactly what was going to happen. And usually with a thriller, once you read it, you kind of remember and the surprise and the shock is gone, but with this one, her writing style is just so gripping. It's like reading it for the first time all over again, and I loved every second of it. So again, if you don't know the plot, 5 kids are chosen by the FBI because they all have natural abilities, but they are enhanced natural abilities. So our main character, Cassie, is really good at reading people and understanding what they're going to do next based on certain aspects of their personality and how they act. So with this, she and the 4 others try to solve cold cases and they end up getting tripped up in some serial murder cases. I love it. So I reread a second book because for May our year-a-thon theme was rereads, so I picked up The Messenger of Fear by Michael Grant. This one I first read 2 or 3 years ago because I received a copy of it from BEA, and when I first read it I gave it 5 out of 5 stars, but this time I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. It is still a really amazing story with a very unique plotline, but the reason I dropped half a star is because the characters fell just a little bit flatter than I remembered. It's very plot heavy and the fears are very strong, but we don't really learn about our main character, Mara, until maybe the last 30 pages or so. So that was a little disappointing. I remembered it being a little bit rounder than that. So I did still really enjoy it, but not as much as I did the first time. So The Messenger of Fear follows a girl named Mara who wakes up in an abandoned field and is later approached by somebody we've come to find out is called the Messenger of Fear. Not to spoil anything, obviously. So the messenger's job is to go to people and give them the justice they should have had based on crimes or bad things they've done in their lives. So that could be stealing, that could be rape, bullying, anything that is considered wicked, the messenger will find you, which is the tagline on the book, and then they can choose to accept their fate and face their fear or play a game to get out of facing their fear. Both are very dark, it is very twisted, it is kind of gruesome but very detailed. I really enjoyed it. I like dark, gross things like that. So if you like the dark, gritty stuff, I would totally recommend checking out this duology. So then the novella that I read this month accompanied that series, and that was The Snake by Michael Grant. This is a 1.5 in the series, and it's very short. I read it while on my lunch break for work, but I am really glad that I read it before going into the sequel. It was very easy to read because the story was quite gripping. We just followed 2 characters that we didn't see from the first book, and then just go on their journey facing their fears. I wouldn't say that if you want to read this series that the novella is crucial to read, but it did definitely add a few extra elements to the series. So I give the novella 4 out of 5 stars, as well as The Tattooed Heart by Michael Grant, which is the sequel / companion to this little duology. From what I remember, I gave this book a lower rating because it did take me a little bit longer to read. There was less fears and less characters in it, but more character development between Mara and the messenger, which I really liked. I enjoyed that the series concluded very well, and there is still a little bit of wiggle room if you wanted to add another book or a novella to it, but I don't feel like it ended without me getting anything. So the story developed, the plot developed, and yeah, overall I was happy with how it wrapped up and was happy that I finally read it. Because I was on a roll with finishing series, I picked up Allison AW Volume 3 by Jonathan Luna and Sarah Vaughn. This is the final graphic novel in this little trilogy, and I really enjoyed it. I was really sad to see it end, but I did give it 5 out of 5 stars. Again, I loved the way it ended. It was very different than where I thought the story was gonna go. I had an idea and it kind of followed that, but then twisted at the end. So overall, I really love this graphic novel. If you didn't hear me talk about it before, it is about a guy named Alex and a robot named Ada that live in this artificial intelligence world, but robots are coming to life on their own and giving them their own personalities, and it's just very drama without angst and very, can't think of the right word, dystopian in the government rebellion aspects. Overall, I just really enjoyed the series. At this point in the month, I started to feel like I was burning myself out with all the reading I was doing, so I decided to pick up a novel I knew I was going to enjoy, and that is the You Ive Never Known by Ellen Hopkins. This novel hit me hard. It is a ride from beginning to end, and there's so many moments where you want to cry for our main character Ariel, but also scream at her. There were characters I loved, there were characters I hated, there were characters that I was iffy on, but overall it was just such an amazing told story that I couldn't get enough of it. My favorite part of the story overall, I think, was actually that it was told in 2 different formats. So it's written in her regular free verse as well as regular prose, I guess you would say. So like I said, I gave this book 4.5 out of 5 stars, but the reason that it dropped half a star from this rating is because I didn't like where the story went with Gabe. Gabe is one of the main characters in the story. He's also a love interest for Ariel, but I didn't like where the story went in the end. Once the relationship climaxed, no pun intended, it just stopped. She kind of pushed him into a corner and only called him when she needed a ride, and again, no pun intended, but she was just very naive and selfish, and I understand that she's a teenager, but at the same time, I don't understand how she could be so self-centered. I understand you've got a lot of issues going on, but he was at her beck and call, and that bothered me. So really loved the story, but didn't love how all of that played out. I had people in my life with the same characteristics as Ariel's father, so I really emphasized with her for that. So I think that helped my appreciation of the novel, but overall I loved it. So worth a read. If you haven't read Ellen Hopkins, this is probably one of the lighter ones to start with, since a lot of her other ones focus a lot on like drug addiction and rape. But I would say this is a good one to start with, especially because it does also have the regular prose built into it. But give it a read, it's fantastic. So then I picked up Killer Instinct by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. This is the second book in the Natural series, and again, I loved it, 5 out of 5 stars. This novel does read a little bit slower than the first one, but only because the plot is so intricately woven, and you don't realize how important some of the little details are until you get to the end. So I love the characters, I'm obsessed with them. This one specifically focuses on Dean and his past and his relationship with his father. So Dean is probably one of my favorite characters of the 5. Just from a psychological perspective, he's so interesting to read because he has this subtle way of caring for things, but also really struggles with personal punishment, and I just find it fascinating to read, and I think he's a very lovable character, even though I think he's written not to be, kind of. I think I'm obsessed with the series because this author is leading like my dream life. She has a PhD, she teaches psychology, and she writes crime YA novels, and that's everything I want to do in my life. So I'm very inspired by this author, and I love all of her books, so I'm excited to keep reading more. So I also read a review book this month, and that was Weave a Murderous Web by Anne Rothman Hicks and Ken Hicks. This took me a couple days to read, but I did enjoy it, and I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. So this is an adult murder thriller mystery novel about a New York City litigator named Jane who likes to get her hands at a little bit of everything. So first she started helping this woman on a case that just kind of started with missed child support payments, but then it explodes into like murder and drugs and everything. So I did really enjoy it. At times I got very confused because I did not understand where the plot was going and what the writer was trying to get across, but I did find the writing style to be very detailed. So it is very wordy at times, but it also fits very well because our character's perspective is a lawyer, so she is taught to focus on all of these little details. So it did carry over very well into the story. So I did enjoy it. There were a couple issues with the love interest where at one point I didn't think it was even necessary to involve a love interest, that it would have been better for her to like stand on her own and just not add that whole other aspect to it, because it just got kind of there but not really there. So yeah, overall I enjoyed it. If you are interested in thrillers, I would recommend this one. So from Weave a Murderous Web, I do have a full review, so I will link that down below. Forgot to mention. And then the last book that I read this month was That Was Then, This Is Now by S.E. Hinton. This was, again, lent to me by my friend that originally lent me You. So I really enjoyed this novel. It was very short. It's only like 150 something pages, but I read it in 2 sittings. I couldn't put it down. So this novel follows 2 young boys, Mark and Brian. I imagine it's Brian. It's spelled like this, and I've been pronouncing it as Brian. Told from his perspective, and it is just 2 16-year-olds being reckless, but kind of growing up and trying to understand where the future is. So Brian is focusing on girls and relationships and wants to get a job, whereas Mark is still really into fighting and stealing and just the thrill of living in the moment. So there are a couple turning points in the plot where they kind of realize where their life is going if they keep heading on this path. And yeah, so like I said, it's a short, so I should stop talking about the book, but I did really enjoy it. If you like S.E. Hinton's writing, this is a really good one to read, and like I said, read it in 2 sittings, can't go wrong. 4 out of 5 stars. So yes, those were the 10 books that I read this month. Hopefully I can keep this up for the next month. I will be posting a TBR video tomorrow, but then I do probably the week after that, I want to do like a general summer TBR, because I have a lot of like light, fluffy, contemporary books that I want to read throughout the course of the summer. So if you'd be interested in seeing that, make sure you let me know down below. Or anything else you want to see, make sure you let me know. If you read any of the books that I read this month, make sure you let me know down below so we can talk about them. I generally had a really good reading month. I don't think I really have anything too bad to say about any of them. But yes, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye.